Member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we're in this House debating C-3063. This is the second bill to implement provisions of this budget. There are a few noteworthy elements in this bill which I will address today. Most importantly, my remarks will focus on what is not in this Budget Implementation Act. Financial issues have been the main focus in this House during this session. Many Canadians are concerned and have been watching with disappointment. The sponsor of this bill, Bill C-63, the Minister of Finance, is embroiled in so many scandals that I don't even know where to begin. Prior to many allegations coming to light, people from North Island Powell River, my riding, came to my office, wrote me letters and emails protesting and expressing deep concern around Bill C-27, a bill that weakens pension obligations. When Canadians later learned that the sponsor of this bill, the Minister of Finance, still owned shares in Morneau Shepell, they were concerned. I was asked, does this mean the minister will make millions off the prospect of this bill? And they were concerned that the minister would make even more if this bill was passed. This is one of the clearest cases of conflict of interest we've seen in years. That's why we need a formal investigation into his actions. Imagine as well the sudden influx of calls, emails, and mail in constituency offices across Canada when the finance minister started his so-called consultation on the small business tax. The minister failed to respect Canadian small businesses in this process. Mr. Speaker, in my riding, I represent many small businesses, and in our region, our economy has had many challenges. We have seen a significant change from a very focused, resource-based economy, and now it's changing and broadening to include a strong and growing small business community. In the summer, the many farms and tourism-based businesses contacted my office. Many of them simply did not have time during the summer to participate in any consultation. Mr. Speaker, I also had the honor of meeting with some doctors in my region. And what was most disheartening was hearing how hurt they were when they heard the Prime Minister of Canada talk about the so-called rich doctors. Well, Mr. Speaker, in many rural and remote communities across Canada, finding health professionals is hard, and it is getting harder. The doctors who spoke with me were very concerned about this divisive nature of these comments and the impacts on their work in their communities. Returning to the Finance Minister, the people from my riding are very concerned about the minister hiding his wealth from the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. I don't know many Canadians who would have forgotten their house in the south of France. So much for a transparent government. This same minister still has a series of number accounts stashed away from public scrutiny. This raises more troubling questions. Let's not forget the Ethics Commissioner came to exist as a part of the Federal Accountability Act in 2007 after another series of Liberal moral and ethical failings. Well, today the Liberals have found more ways than ever to protect their friends, the tax cheats, by not addressing the sophisticated systems that can only be used by the wealthiest and the most well-connected. Bills like the one we are debating here today will not change much for hardworking Canadians. And Mr. Speaker, my riding is full of everyday hardworking Canadians. Bills like C-30 or 63 keep protecting cheaters for scrutiny and justice, and that's not right. As the Paradise Papers are still unraveling, I cannot say that I have much confidence in this government other than having a good soundbite for the media. One thing to keep in mind is that the Paradise Papers is a result of a leak from only one firm. There are many other firms out there carrying trusts and offshore companies linked to Canadians. It's a matter of finding them, and CRA is simply not doing enough. The latest report from the Auditor General was not friendly to the Canadian Revenue Agency. While tax cheats are not its main focus, the report highlights a total mismanagement of CRA call centres. The AG's report indicates that the CRA has been blocking over 50% of Canadians' calls for help. Even worse, CRA agents are providing misleading or inaccurate information almost 30% of the time. The Auditor General's report also focused on the failings of the Liberals' responsibility to implement the Phoenix program. In fact, the AG pointed out that the Liberals have no idea to the full extent and causes of the Phoenix problem. It is estimated it will take years before solving pay problems and will most likely cost Canadians around $1 billion. But, Mr. Speaker, this is about so much more than just $1 billion. It is about civil servants across Canada not receiving their pay. It's about Canadians losing their homes, having to go to food banks, having their credit destroyed, and family stress. I think it's very important that in this House we recognize that civil servants who are still going to work every day, even when they are not getting paid, these people are dedicated to their work and to Canadians. So many of my constituents have asked me, why doesn't the government just have someone writing checks while this is figured out? We just need to be paid. I have taken the time to talk about this failing because I know Canadians want this problem fixed. What better way to fix it than in a Budget Implementation Act? Bill C-63 lays the foundation for Canada's membership in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which we believe will cause many problems. In fact, Bill C-63 allows the Finance Minister to transfer 480 million Canadian dollars to the bank. Since the bank was only recently launched, the government cannot fully evaluate the risks of privatizing infrastructure in countries where this bank will invest. Some experts have raised concerns about the lack of provisions regarding environmental impact assessments, labor rights, or anti-corruption reforms, as is generally the case with loans made by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Because the bank has only been in existence for 1 year, it is difficult to say with any certainty whether it will be respecting international standards. We need better assurances from the government about these concerns, and we need proof that the bank will not contribute to privatization of infrastructure, the degradation of the environment, and the violation of labor rights. Mr. Speaker, this government can't pay its own federal employees, but we can see them send $480 million to foreign initiative that may privatize infrastructure. This government can't catch tax cheats or fix our revenue agency, but we can spend $480 million on a foreign initiative that degrades the environment. They can't understand the realities of small business, but they can spend $480 million on a foreign initiative that will violate potentially labor rights. Let's recap what progress has been made on the first Budget Implementation Act, including the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. Well, a few months in, and the federal government has moved in predictable Liberal fashion. A board made largely of Liberal donors and promoters of privatization. This list includes James Cherry, the former president and CEO of Airports de Montreal, who has previously advocated for airport privatization. How surprising. I can't wait to read the AG report on this. But wait, there is more. The bank will be subject to audits at a lower standard and with less transparency than the Auditor General has over direct government departments, despite the $35 billion in public funding to establish the bank. Again, so much for a transparent government. Before the budget was tabled, our finance critic wrote the finance minister to ask him to include some provisions to create a fairer and greener society. For example, we asked him to cap CEO stock options for large companies, actively fight tax havens, establish a federal $15 per hour minimum wage for workers, invest in energy efficiency home renovations, address accessibility problems linked to housing, drinking water, mental health services and education in First Nations communities, and establish a universal pharmacare system. None of these provisions were implemented, Mr. Speaker. After 2 years of listening to this government talking about the middle class and those working hard to join it, this budget demonstrates for a fact that Liberals have no idea who those people are. Mr. Speaker, I cannot support this bill. It has clearly too many gaps that leave the most vulnerable with little and does not address the important parts of moving towards a fair tax system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Avalon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member for her intervention. She spoke about a lot of things that she disagreed with. She didn't come up with any resolutions to any of them. But I wonder, she didn't mention the Canada Child Benefit that was changed under this government and the increase in payments that went to families. I know in my riding of Avalon, 9,280 households received cheques, averaging $5,180 per month, for a total from July 1st of 2016 to June 30th, 2017, $47.9 million went to families in my riding. Families that needed that money, they didn't tuck it away in a bank account and save it. They spent it. And that shows by the way the economy is going now and the unemployment rate that we're seeing, lowest in a decade. I wonder, could you comment on how that's affecting the families in her riding?
The honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his important question. When I talk to the people of my riding of North Island, Powell River, and it hasn't changed, unfortunately, from when I was knocking on doors in 2015 and 2014, we definitely heard from too many women, actually, that couldn't work. I had one woman in particular come to me very recently and share the reality that she was trying to work and the costs of daycare were so expensive, so prohibitive, she's had to quit her job. She said, Rachel, at the end of the month, I was getting about $20 a week because all of my money, everything I was making was going into paying for daycare. I really encourage this government to listen to the people of Canada, to listen to the families and hear what they say about how expensive childcare is and how it has not created one childcare space in this budget, nor in the last budget. This is really needed because this is about being a feminist country, supporting women to enter the workforce, and also supporting families, because it's good that they get some money, but the reality is it does not come even close to covering the cost of daycare. And it's the responsibility of the government to work on all fronts to support families.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I listened to my friend's comments about the budget, and certainly there are a lot of holes in the budget that need to be addressed, and we don't have time to address all of those today, but my colleague mentioned some of the ill-thought-out tax proposals that the government presented in the summer this year. And I certainly had a big response in my riding from small business owners, from farmers, from professional corporations, from doctors who are working in underserviced areas, providing good medical care. So that was a huge issue that my riding dealt with. But, Mr. Speaker, my question goes to a different level. And in my riding, I'm finding people are very cynical about the current finance minister, and some of his ethics breaches when it comes to disclosing his assets, and also being part of the bill to address Bill C-27, which clearly favors the company that he's chairman of, or he was incorporated. So I'd just like to ask my colleague if she's hearing those kinds of concerns from her members as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly thank the member for this question. In my riding, we definitely heard from the business community. One of the things I heard repeatedly from them was, you know, Rachel, we are very supportive of tax fairness, but we aren't being consulted in a meaningful way. This could undermine our businesses profoundly. We're very concerned about the unintended consequences, especially in rural and remote communities. And we want to make sure our voices are heard. And we've definitely worked hard and continue to work hard with those communities so that we can make sure that their voices are heard in this House. That is my job. It's my sacred obligation, and I take that very seriously. But the other reality is, you know, I think as politicians, we have a responsibility to be ethical and honest, because our constituents and this country are relying on us to do the right thing, to always care for their concern, and always be willing to listen even when we don't disagree. And I think I agree with the member that I've definitely heard from my constituents a raised sense of cynicism and concern that this government simply doesn't know and understand the reality of people living every day in Canada. Thank you.